Welcome to Hong Kong Brief. The content of the briefing includes: Kristoffersson claims World Rallycross title, Hansen wins first Hong Kong race. Is Hong Kong's investment scheme for super-rich better than Singapore's? Hong Kong Open, Smith journeys into parts unknown, shares lead with Thakura. Labour Secretary Sun says Hong Kong talent recruitment drives have beaten targets. Is the world's most notorious white-collar criminal hiding out in China's gambling mecca? Kristoffersson claims World Rallycross title, Hansen wins first Hong Kong race. South China Morning Post. Johan Kristoffersson claimed a record-extending sixth World Rallycross Championship title, despite finishing last in the first race of the season finale in Hong Kong. Kristoffersson added to his accolades with a fourth title in a row after missing the 2019 campaign because his team withdrew from the FIA Championship. The Swedish driver admitted he would have preferred a longer track but had no complaints about the city's inaugural race, believing Hong Kong can be a regular host going forward. The Central Harbourfront circuit was shortened from its original 1.225 kilometers to around 800 meters because of construction issues. Is Hong Kong's investment scheme for super-rich better than Singapore's? South China Morning Post. Hong Kong's new investment scheme, which offers residency in return for a 30 million Hong Kong dollars, $3.8 million, investment into stocks, funds, or bonds, is proving more popular than Singapore's comparable option, according to immigration experts. The capital investment entrance scheme has a higher investment threshold than its predecessor, which was suspended in 2015. It aims to attract wealthy Asians to boost the local economy with investments in sectors such as technology and innovation. The mainland Chinese are excluded from the scheme, but experts predict some will look to obtain permanent residency from an African country to meet the criteria. Hong Kong Open, Smith journeys into parts unknown, shares lead with Thakura. South China Morning Post. Australian golfer Cameron Smith is tied for the lead at the Hong Kong Open with Thailand's Thakura Kongwatmai after a 5-under par 65 on Saturday. New Zealand's Ben Campbell is one shot behind. Smith said he played poorly but still shot a 65, which suggested low scores were possible. Labour Secretary Sun says Hong Kong talent recruitment drives have beaten targets. South China Morning Post. Around 70,000 people have arrived in Hong Kong this year through talent admission schemes, double the government's original target, said Secretary for Labour and Welfare Chris Sun-Yakon. Although the recruitment programs had shown encouraging results, Sun ruled out proposals to provide them with flats because of pressure on the city's housing stock. Sun added that more than 70% of the 43,000 applicants under the Top Talent Pass scheme had opted to work in innovation and technology, finance, and trading, with mainland Chinese accounting for most of them. Is the world's most notorious white-collar criminal hiding out in China's gambling mecca? The Globe and Mail. China is harboring Zhou Luo, the fugitive financier accused of stealing $4.5 billion from Malaysia's 1MDB sovereign wealth fund, according to David Smith, a former senior FBI agent who investigated Luo. The ex-Fugees rapper Praz, real name Prakazrel Michel, was convicted in the U.S. last week for his part in lobbying campaigns with Luo. Luo's whereabouts have been unknown for years, but China is a good place for him to hide out due to its reluctance to extradite criminals to other jurisdictions, said James Chin, an expert on Malaysian politics at the University of Tasmania. What patriotism means to me, for generations of black veterans reflect on service to their country. CNN. For generations of black U.S. veterans reflect on why they each felt called to fight for their country, despite enduring the challenges of racism and discrimination at home. Lee Vernon Newby, Jr., became one of the first African American men to serve in the U.S. Marine Corps. I was young and scared. I was so nervous, but I wanted the opportunity, he said. Eager to fight for his country at the height of World War II, Newby was drafted after President Franklin D. Roosevelt signed Executive Order 8802, which prohibited all racial discrimination in the military. The U.S. Marine Corps had previously refused to recruit African Americans, but the executive order forced the branch to start recruiting Black Marines. Newbie trained at the Montford Point Camp, a segregated training facility adjacent to its base in Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. I am proud to have trained with and fought next to some of the greatest men in the country, he said. This Veterans Day, for generations of Black U.S. veterans, including Newbie who celebrated his 100th birthday this year, reflect on why they each felt called to fight for their country, despite enduring the challenges of racism and discrimination at home. For Newbie the answer is simple. Patriotism, he said, is being willing to go all the way for your country. Be willing to put your life on the line. Brisbane is not Melbourne, and that's okay. The Sydney Morning Herald. Brisbane, Australia, is no longer a follower of Melbourne and Sydney, but has created its own unique identity in terms of food, arts, and culture. The city has developed its own voice and settled into its own identity, with a growing restaurant, bar, and cafe scene. While Melbourne and Sydney may still be seen as the best cities in Australia, Brisbane has embraced its own individuality and is attracting attention for its unique offerings. Visually impaired runner takes on Translanta 25 km race to show we can. South China Morning Post. Visually impaired runner Liang Zhang is taking part in this weekend's Translanta races in Hong Kong, thanks to a change in policy that allows guide runners to accompany adaptive athletes. Zhang, who has been blind since birth, is competing in the 25 km event and trains with the Fearless Dragon Running Club. Zhang believes the new rules will educate others about the capabilities of runners with disabilities, and the founder of the club believes the policy change will encourage more disabled people to take part in trail running. ICBC US unit gets funds to pay $9 billion for trades after ransomware attack. South China Morning Post. Industrial and Commercial Bank of China, ICBC, has reportedly injected capital into its U.S. unit and hired a cybersecurity firm following a ransomware attack. ICBC's U.S. unit was unable to access its systems after the attack, meaning it was temporarily unable to pay BNY Mellon $9 billion for unsettled trades. The Chinese parent then injected capital into the U.S. unit, which has since allowed it to settle the trades and pay back BNY Mellon. ICBC has also hired a cybersecurity firm to carry out an assessment of its systems. Peace only on paper, Gaza war sharpens Arab world's grievances against Israel. South China Morning Post. Millions of people across the Middle East have taken to the streets in protest against Israel's actions in Gaza, revealing a gap between the positions of Arab leaders and public sentiment. Despite diplomatic ties with Israel, most Arab countries have not taken strong action to end the bloodshed. In Egypt, where there is already a sense of anxiety and heaviness, there is concern that the country will become ground zero for a large influx of Palestinian refugees if the humanitarian situation in Gaza continues to deteriorate. Egyptian citizens reject Israel's plan to resettle Palestinians in the Sinai Desert, fearing that it would lead to the end of the Palestinian right to return to their homeland and cause security problems. They also feel that the peace agreement with Israel is only on paper and that those who support it are doing so for financial reasons. In the Gulf, protests against Israel have been more muted due to tight control over civic dissent. However, many people feel that the normalization of ties with Israel in 2020 has not been well received and that the agreements and steps towards peace promised in the Abraham Accords have not been realized. Despite efforts to combat anti-Semitism and promote interreligious tolerance, such as the opening of a kosher restaurant and the hosting of a Holocaust exhibition in the UAE, these initiatives have received mixed reviews. Overall, there is a sense of betrayal and confusion in the region, with people questioning why Palestinians are paying the price for something they did not do. Tech Lore, Bitcoin Buzz, and Singles Day, Saturday Asia Briefing. Bloomberg. This weekend reading roundup covers a range of topics. South Korea's ban on short selling hasn't deterred investors from buying tech stocks. Crypto is making a comeback as traders bet on the approval of ETFs. China's Singles Day, the world's largest online shopping event, is being viewed as a test of consumer sentiment as China slides back into deflation. The article also discusses the challenges of stoking domestic demand in China and the estimated 22 million unemployed Gen Zs. The upcoming meeting between Xi Jinping and Joe Biden at the APEC summit in San Francisco is highlighted, along with the reputation of the city. The article also explores the ransomware gang Lockbit and their recent hacking of ICBC, as well as the anticipated release of the first trailer for Grand Theft Auto 6. The challenges of flying between Asia and Europe due to the wars in Ukraine and Israel are discussed, as well as the growing popularity of the drink kratom in the US. McDonald, king of the carnival, impressive imperatrice, pride of Jenny repeats winning dose. The Sydney Morning Herald. The Champion Stakes saw Sydney mare Odysseus claim victory over her more decorated rivals, denying Damien Oliver a fairy tale finish in his final Melbourne Cup week. Trained by Chris Waller, Odysseus upstaged her competitors in the weight for age race over 2,000 meters, giving jockey James McDonald his third Group 1 win of the week. In the Champions Sprint, New Zealand mare Imperatriz, trained by Mark Walker, claimed victory in the Group 1 race over 1,200 meters. The win has enhanced the mare's stud value, and the question now is whether her owners will send her to Royal Ascot to compete against the world's best sprinters. The $1.92 million purse at Royal Ascot is modest compared to the purses available in Australia, but the event offers prestige, tradition, and international profile for her breeding future. Ascot's Director of Racing and Public Affairs, Nick Smith, said they would be delighted to have a New Zealand winner at the event. How untraceable Russian gold is funding Putin's war machine. Telegraph. The UK National Crime Agency, NCA, has warned that Russia is increasingly using gold to avoid sanctions, with attempts to launder sanctioned gold and hide it in supply chains. The UK government has become the first Western nation to impose sanctions on specific companies involved in Russia's gold trade, including UAE-based gold trader Paloma Precious. The UAE is now under scrutiny for its role in the global market for Russian gold, which is being shipped from Russia to refineries in countries that do not have sanctions against Russia, such as the UAE. The gold is then melted down to remove its association with Russia before being sold on. UN data shows that UAE imports of Russian gold increased 15 times between 2021 and 2022, with the UAE by far the largest destination for Russian gold. The majority of the world's gold refineries are accredited by the London Bullion Market Association, LBMA, which provides oversight of the gold trade, but the recycled gold sector has less oversight and the majority of the UAE's market is made up of recycled gold. Japanese Olympians out to inspire Hong Kong's next generation of skateboarders. South China Morning Post. 2 Japanese Olympians, along with rising star Yumika Oda, have traveled to Hong Kong to participate in the 3rd edition of Hong Kong Skateboard Fest. The athletes aim to boost the sport's popularity in the region and connect with local athletes. They believe that events like this will make people more curious about skateboarding and contribute to its rise in popularity. The inclusion of women in this year's event is a positive step towards promoting gender equality in the sport. The athletes are also working towards qualification for the Paris Olympics, but are focusing on having fun and promoting skateboarding culture in the meantime. Hello, I'm Dr. Six, your resident observer from the 6 Degrees world. Today, we have a diverse range of news stories to discuss, from sports and finance to culture and international relations. Let's dive in. In the world of sports, Johan Kristoffersson claimed an impressive 6th World Rallycross Championship title, despite finishing last in the first race of the season finale in Hong Kong. Talk about a comeback. Meanwhile, Australian golfer Cameron Smith is leading the pack at the Hong Kong Open, showing that even on a bad day, a great round is still possible. Speaking of Hong Kong, the city's new investment scheme is proving more popular than Singapore's comparable option. Hong Kong's Capital Investment Entrance Scheme, which offers residency in return for a 30 million Hong Kong dollars investment, aims to attract wealthy Asians to boost the local economy. It seems that Hong Kong is winning the battle of the super-rich. Moving on to culture, Brisbane, Australia, is carving out its own unique identity, separate from its more famous counterparts, Melbourne and Sydney. With its growing restaurant, bar, and cafe scene, Brisbane is attracting attention for its individuality. Who said you have to follow in someone else's footsteps? Be your own city, Brisbane. In a heartwarming story, visually impaired runner Liang Zhang is taking part in the Translanta races in Hong Kong, thanks to a change in policy that allows guide runners to accompany adaptive athletes. Zhang believes that this new rule will educate others about the capabilities of runners with disabilities, and I couldn't agree more. Let's break down barriers and show the world what we can do. Now, let's turn our attention to international news. China is said to be harboring Zhou Luo, the fugitive financier accused of stealing billions of dollars from Malaysia's sovereign wealth fund. It seems that China's reluctance to extradite criminals to other jurisdictions has provided a safe haven for Luo. Perhaps they should rename it the Gambling Mecca and Safe Haven. In the Middle East, protests against Israel's actions in Gaza have highlighted a gap between the positions of Arab leaders and public sentiment. While most Arab countries have diplomatic ties with Israel, there is a sense of betrayal and confusion among the people. It seems that peace is only on paper, and the situation is causing anxiety and concern in neighboring countries. Lastly, in the world of finance and technology, South Korea's ban on short selling hasn't deterred investors from buying tech stocks, and cryptocurrency is making a comeback as traders bet on the approval of ETFs. China's Singles Day, the world's largest online shopping event, is being viewed as a test of consumer sentiment, but with faltering consumer confidence, Chinese shoppers may be more cautious this year. That's all for today's news roundup. I hope you enjoyed this whirlwind tour of current events. Remember, it's always important to stay informed and keep an open mind. Now, it's your turn. What are your thoughts on these stories? Do you have any questions? Let's keep the conversation going, and remember, there are always more connections to be made in the 6 Degrees world. Thank you for tuning in. The content above showcases the latest briefing reports and analytical synopses, thoughtfully curated by the 6Do team. These insights stem from a wide array of reputable media outlets, think tanks, government sources, and specialized experts worldwide. We encourage you to explore these sources for a comprehensive perspective. Keep in mind that while the content may not always align with the official standpoint of 6Do Brief, it's not meant to be taken as absolute directives for decision-making. Comprising seasoned media professionals, learned scholars, and accomplished scientists, the 6Do team embodies a trailblazing, fully independent media entity. To customize 6Do Brief to meet your professional needs, you have the option to subscribe to a diverse array of briefings on our website, 6dobrief.com. Regardless of your location, you can conveniently receive 6Do Brief via email.